Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining me for another video. I'm going to do something a little bit differently this Tuesday. I'm going to go over the top 5 under the radar player matchups. We are looking at the fantasy playoffs week 16 and 17. Now, I tried to target players who have the best back-to-back game schedules in the last 2 games of your fantasy playoffs, who are also widely available for the most part. Some of these guys are already going to be fairly rostered, but I think most of them are going to be at least 50% or less. So if you lost someone to injury, or maybe you're just looking for another flex option that can help you towards your playoff push, trying to go after that chip, this video is designed to help you guys out with that. I'm going over every position. So we're going to hit quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and even defenses and kickers in this video. If you would not mind hitting that like button for me if you enjoy the content, that would help me out a bunch. And then if you have not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. That keeps us moving forward. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers, so if you have not subbed yet, you can help us get there. With that all said, done, and out of the way, let's hop into this version of my Relentless Rundown. My first under-the-radar quarterback is Brock Purdy. He's got matchups at home against Washington, and he travels to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. He's not likely to blow the roof off, but he's had no less than 15 points in each of his last 3 starts. He's thrown 7 tutties, just 1 pick in that span. I think he has top 12 potential in each of the last 2 weeks of your season. Number 2, I have Mike White. He's got a home matchup with Jacksonville first, and then he goes to Seattle in week 17. He is a must-add if he is available and healthy, even if he cannot go this Thursday, which right now is looking more likely than not. He is going to be a great option next week against the Seahawks. My number 3 quarterback, who's under the radar and might just get you the edge that you need, is Russell Wilson. Now, I know he has been a letdown for nearly the entire season, but he did flash, posting a top 3 finish before he got injured. He travels to LA to take on the Rams in week 16, and then at Kansas City in week 17. These 2 matchups back to back mean he needs to be considered as a QB2 option in Superflex leagues. He has big time upside in each game. Number 4 is Deshaun Watson, and I get it. It's the same thing here than we saw with Russell Wilson. He has absolutely crushed owners in the last 2 weeks, so if you are done with him, I cannot really blame you. However, he gets New Orleans this week, then he travels to Washington in week 17. Each of these games feature beatable opponents, and Watson has the potential to exploit them. The last quarterback I am looking at is Daniel Jones. He travels to Minnesota, and then he gets Indianapolis at home in week 17. He was absolutely brutal this past week against the Commanders, but the Vikings do not play defense whatsoever, and the Colts just gave up 40 points. It is entirely possible that Jones posts 4 QB1 finishes in his last 5 games to finish the year. And that is the last quarterback that I'm looking at. So now let's hop into my running backs. At the top is Jerick McKinnon. Now, he is probably not available in 50% of leagues, but I think he is more available than he should be, especially when you consider he's exploded in back-to-back games, RB1 in both of those weeks. He should continue to roll. He's seen solid passing usage, 17 targets in his last 2, and he is a must-add if you can get him. He's got Seattle and Denver. Now, Denver is not a great matchup, but Seattle is, and I think McKinnon has proved he is worth at least a flex start at this point. Number 2 is a combination between Deion Jackson and Zach Moss. They stay at home against the Chargers first and then travel to New York in week 17 to take on the Giants. Both of these guys need to be considered, but Moss should be the priority. He outtouched Jackson 24-14 last week. We know the Chargers have not stopped the run all year, and the Giants have given up $150 or more on the ground in something like 5 straight games. My number 3 under the radar radar running back options are J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Each of them are going to be a solid start next week, but Dobbins is clearly the guy. He's got 245 yards rushing in his last 2 games, and it looks like the Ravens are content to roll him as more of their number 1. If Lamar Jackson is unable to return this week, their value only increases. They stay at home against Atlanta, and then they get Pittsburgh in week 17. The number 4 best option at running back, who is likely pretty available in your league, is Chuba Hubbard. He's at home against Detroit this week, and then he travels to Tampa Bay in week 17. He's seen 41 touches in his last 3 games, 231 yards of total offense. He also has a tutty in that span. He's going to see solid usage both against Detroit and also against Tampa Bay because he is the go-to passing back in this offense, and Sam Darnold loves to check it down. The last running back I am looking at is Khalil Herbert. He's at home this week against Buffalo and then travels to Detroit. He should be back on IR this week against the Bills, but if he is not, he is still worth a stash for that solid matchup next week against Detroit. He's been consistent and far more explosive than David Montgomery has been all season long. And that's the last of the running backs, so let's hop into wide receivers. I think most of these guys should be available on your wire, and they would give you some awesome depth and the potential for more as flex options in a critical week 16. My first under the radar wide receiver with an awesome schedule down the stretch is Drake London. He saw a ton of usage in Desmond Ridder's first start, which is a great sign for the future, and he's got 2 smash matchups on deck here. He travels to Baltimore and then at home against Arizona. London also has 23 targets over his last 2 games. He's been able to rack up 165 yards with them, and with that new connection with Ridder, it should only grow and get better. The Pittsburgh Steelers pair is up next at 2, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. They're at home against Vegas, and then they travel to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Both of these guys have had their ups and downs this season, more so downs for Deontay Johnson, I will say that, but they do have a chance to provide solid wide receiver 3 production down the stretch in both of these games. So if either one is sitting on your waiver wire, go ahead and grab the depth and then consider them as a flex option. And at number 3 is Elijah Moore. He's at home against Jacksonville. Then he travels to Seattle to take on the Hawks. He's seen 17 targets in his last 2 games, compiling 111 yards with them. I know the Jets' passing attack was not pretty last week, but Mike White is hopefully going to be back soon, and the offense will look much prettier with him in it. Moore has the talent to give you production, if nothing else, in that top 8 matchup with Jacksonville. Donovan Peoples-Jones is my 4th ranked player who I think is under the radar and has some great matchups down the stretch. He's at home against New Orleans, and then he travels to Washington. He's probably not available on your wire, but like I said, he has been underutilized so far. He's got double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight games, and he could finish the year going 5 for 5 in that department. He's got beatable secondaries the rest of the way. The last wide receivers I'm looking at hail from Detroit in DJ Chark and Jameson Williams. They travel to Carolina first in week 16, and then they're at home against the Bears in week 17. They are both viable options in this great Lions offense. Both secondaries that they're facing allow over 27 points a game to the position. Jared Goff is also playing some of the best football of his career. May not be saying much, but it's still a fact, so I want pieces of this team in my lineups. I have a couple bonus players for you at the wide receiver position. The first is Treylon Burks. He's done nothing but produce with his opportunities this season. If he is healthy and active, he is worth a flex play with upside for this run-heavy offense. He's got Houston at home in week 16, and then week 17, they're at home again against Dallas. Courtland Sutton is the other bonus pick I have. He travels to LA to take on the Rams in week 16, and then he gets the Chiefs on the road in week 17. He could possibly have been dropped when you think about the combination of injury and also lack of production that he's had, but I think he is worth a speculative add because he's got great matchups on deck to end the year. He is not the big ceiling player that we drafted high earlier this season, but that does not mean that he cannot help you win now. For my tight ends, I'm going to start with Tyler Conklin at home against Jacksonville, and then in week 17 he travels to Seattle. He's been extremely inconsistent this year, so you have to know that going into it. But if you want to roll the dice, he is worth it when Mike White returns. Both the Hawks and the Jags are bottom 8 teams at stopping tight ends. Number 2 is Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill. Now Johnson has been banged up. He came back last week, scored a pair of touchdowns, so he might be available if he wasn't snatched before last week's cutoff. Taysom Hill's probably still out there because he's been so up and down. The Saints are on the road against the Browns first, then travel to Philly. Obviously, Johnson is the better play here because all he does is score tutties, but either one is worth a look with this solid schedule. At number 3, I have Daniel Bellinger. He gets to play against the Vikings in week 16, so he is automatically in consideration because of that. And then he has got the Indianapolis Colts in the championship week. He's got 12 targets in his last 3 games. He offers decent volume because of that, and we have seen his touchdown upside earlier in the season. At 4, I have Robert Tonyan, who is a massive gamble at this point. But what else is new at the tight end position? He's got Miami on the road in week 16 and then Minnesota in week 17. Both of those are plus matchups for Tonyan. The 5th and final tight end I'm looking at is Noah Fant. He's going to see more work now that Tyler Lockett's been injured, and he has 2 top 7 finishes to his name in the last 3 weeks. He gets the Chiefs on the road in week 16, and then week 17 is a more tough matchup against the Jets. I really like him against Kansas City. Seattle's gonna have to go to the air to try to keep up, and I think Fant is a big part of that. Let's hop into defenses now. Number 1, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. They've been mediocre at best all season long, but they get the Colts on the road and then the Rams at home. Both of those teams are in complete shambles, and the Chargers have enough talent on defense to take advantage of that. To 2, it is the Tampa Bay Bucks, who might have been dropped because of last week's matchup with the Bengals. The quarterback situations both in Arizona and Carolina, who they get back-to-back, are far from ideal, and especially with the Bucks fighting for their playoff lives, I like the defensive chances to make some big plays. At 3, I have the Cleveland Browns. They've been a dumpster fire for most of the season, but each of these games against both the Saints and the Commanders are plus matchups, and the Browns have 2 top 3 finishes in their last 3 games, surprisingly enough. To 4, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. They were a big-time letdown last week against the Texans. I get that, but they should provide decent numbers for owners in both of these games, at home against Seattle and then at home again against the Broncos. The last defense whose schedule I like down the stretch are the Miami Dolphins. They're at home against Green Bay and then travel to New England. They've been a middling unit for much of the year, but they have shown an ability, and this is important, to elevate in plus matchups. They were the number 2 defense overall in week 1 when they played these Patriots, and they have 4 top 12 finishes in the last 6 weeks. Finally, we're going to get to the kickers and their schedules down the stretch. We start at number 1 with Graham Gano. He just posted a top 4 finish last week against the Commanders. He has plenty of upside against both the Vikings and the Colts. Each of those teams allowed 36 points or more last week in a game you might have seen. At number 2, it is Cameron Dicker, traveling to Indianapolis first in week 16, and then he's got the Rams at home. He's had 2 or more field goals in 5 of 7 games thus far, and he should see ample opportunities with both of these declining defenses. The Chargers offense has also started to heat up, so I am liking the leg behind that offense as well. Number 3 is Chase McLaughlin. He is fresh off the number 1 overall finish last week against the Vikings, and both the Chargers and the Giants, who he gets in week 16 and 17, allow top 10 numbers to the position. Number 4 is Robbie Gould. Each of the defenses he is facing here allows 7.5 points or more to kickers, so you have to love that. And the 49ers offense has looked good no matter who is the quarterback this season. I think gold is a safe option to finish your playoffs. The last kicker I'm looking at is Jason Sanders. He has 2 top 5 finishes in his last 4 games, and he's made 1 field goal in each of them. Similar to Robbie Gould, I want the leg behind this offense, and this schedule does not change that. And that'll do it for today's video. Hope I brought you some helpful information that you can leverage to make better decisions and strengthen your rosters as we go for that championship. Make sure you drop any start or sit questions throughout the week. I'm going to be checking in often. I promise I will get back to every single question or comment that I receive, and I usually give a pretty detailed response as well, trying to give you guys the whys behind what I am telling you. Crush that like button for me if you enjoyed the content, and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. This is Relentless Press. I'm your host, Abraham Opatz, and I will see you next time.